Okay, we are going to be finishing the examples from greatest common factor notes that we started on Thursday. We need to finish up examples number 9, 10, and 11. So when we're finding the greatest common factor of terms, the first thing that we're going to do is have a factor tree. So I'm going to have a factor tree for the number 75 and the factor tree of 30. I'm going to ignore the variables to the end. So right now I'm just going to find a factor tree for 75 and then for 30. What are two factors I can multiply together to get 75? I think about it like this. If I have quarters, so if I have 25 cents, how many quarters will it take to get to 75? 3. So this is prime. Okay, factor up 25. What two numbers? Those are prime, so I'm going to circle them. Okay, so now I'm going to come to 30. What two numbers can I multiply together to get 30?
3 and 10.
3 and 10 or 5 and 6, any of those work. For 10, we have 2 and 5. Okay, so we're going to come down and we're going to write our factors in order from least to greatest, our prime numbers. So my factors for 75 that I circled are what, Morgan?
3, 5, 5.
Okay, and what about for 30?
3, 2, 5.
Always put them in order from least to greatest.
2, 3, 5.
So always put them in order from least to greatest. Now, from here, we're going to work it out by longhand first, and then we'll go through and we'll do the shortcut.
Right.
So, how many x's for 75 do I have?
3.
2.
And how many y's do I have for 75?
3. Good try though, Johnny.
That's all right. Okay, now, how many x's do I have for 30?
3.
And how many y's?
5.
Okay, now, what's the next step that I do?
So what you're going to do is put up your purse.
So it's not always your pairs. I want you to get away from the word pairs in this particular one. No, it's totally fine. Just because we're going to have sometimes where we're going to find the greatest common factor for 3 numbers, and pair only refers to 2. So we're going to circle what they have in common. So what do they have in common here?
They got the 5s.
Okay, so they have 3s. They have 5s. What else?
They got the X.
Okay.
The other X.
Okay.
The Y. The other Y. And the other Y.
Okay. That's it. So now I'm going to drop down. If you write big, you guys are going to have to kind of cram it all in there. Next year we need to make the notes a little bit bigger. So my greatest common factor, what are the numbers that I circled? 3 and which equals?
What?
15.
Okay, so we have 15.
15.
I'm going to put this underneath here.
We got 5 times 5.
Okay, so we have 3 times 5. Because I had a 3 that was in common and a 5 that was in common, which equals 15. So now I'm going to look at my exponents or my variables. How many x's do they share?
2.
How many y's do they share?
3.
3. Now, let's say writing this out is going to get us the right answer. We can circle what they have in common for the variables, and we're still going to get the right answer. But let's say that it was 30x to the third, y to the 15th. Are you really going to want to write out 15 y's?
No.
No, that's going to take a lot of time. So there's a shortcut. How I do it, I look up at the top here. So after I do my factor tree, and after I write out my factors, so I pretty much do my factor tree, I write out my factors, I don't write out the exponents longhand, or excuse me, the variables longhand. I look back up at my terms, and I look at my first term, and I see that it has an x. Does my second term 30 have an x?
Yes.
Okay. Which of those had the smallest exponent?
The 75.
X squared, right?
Yes.
Right there. You see that?
Oh.
So that's what they have in common. Okay? Do they both
Say Y. Yeah.
have a y?
Yeah.
Okay?
Got 3.
Which is the smallest exponent?
1, 3.
See that? There's my answer there. So one way to do this is if they share common variables, so if they both have a variable, You choose the variable with the smallest exponent, and that will give you how many they have in common. Okay? You will. I promise you. You will. It's a lot to kind of take in now, numbers and variables and what numbers and where. So on the next part of your note sheet, it says, when using variables with exponents. So what that means. So when using variables with exponents, use the blank exponent for the variable and the greatest common factor. So which one would I use saying that they have in common? Yeah, x squared. So you use that x squared because it has the what exponent?
2.
Which is what? 2 is blank than 24. You guys think about it. When using variables with exponents, use the blank exponent for the variable and the greatest common factor. Why did you pick x squared?
Because that's what you always put when you come to square.
Well, why did we pick the 2 over the 24? Because it's what?
Because I know.
That's a number.
It's an even. Man, I don't.
I'll be.
2 is blank than 24. 2 is less or smaller. So when using variables with exponent, use the smallest.
Trick question.
That's basically what
I was trying to think if there's a better way to phrase it. Exponent for that variable and the greatest common factor. So under your example 9, you have a little bulleted point where it says when using a variable with the exponents, use the smallest exponent to get the greatest common factor. Smallest. I don't know. I think I lost y'all on that one. I saw like glazed looks on all of y'all like, huh? All right, next one. Example number 10. We have one more after this one. Now, I'm going back to where you find the greatest common factor of 3 numbers. I don't have any variables included. But this is why I told Jalen, don't say circle your pairs, because if I have 3 numbers, I'm not going to have a pair, right? I'm going to have more than a pair. So, how do I start this? What do I do with these 3 numbers?
So what you're going to do is one right number 36. Then you want to see what's the.
Yeah, so I'm going to find a factor tree. For 36, I love your explanation. Let's just less words. Okay, what 2 numbers can I multiply together for 36?
6 times 6.
Which is then?
Oh, y'all can go ahead and do that. I'll just go
3
ahead.
and 2. 9 and 8. You get 9 and 8 from? From 72, ain't it? Oh.
She's smart.
Bless you.
Thank you.
Okay, and then for 8?
Oh, no.
8
2 and 4?
and then 3 and 3.
Wait, I'm not done with 8 yet, you guys.
That's the way.
Oh, 4. 2 and 2.
Yeah. Now that's a common mistake where people don't factor 4, but you can.
It's 3 and 3.
Okay, and then what about for 99?
11 and 9.
Okay. Okay, now what?
9.
Do 3 times 3.
9, 11, always remember.
Wow.
And then what about for 11?
This part.
Oh, it is prime, that's right, so we're going to circle
We're
it.
going to circle it.
Okay. From here, we're going to put greatest common factor. We're going to drop down.
Drop down.
We're going to put, we're not going to draw a random line. We're going to put 36, 72, and 99. And we're going to write our numbers out in order from least to greatest. So what's the factors of 36 here?
2, 3, 2, 3.
Okay, but we're always, Jalen,
Oh,
just to make it...
Y'all keep. Alright, bro.
The big thing is, the reason why you want to write them out in order, it makes finding what they have in common a lot easier. Okay, so what are my numbers in order for 72?
Somebody.
2, 2, 3, 3.
He said 2, 2.
And then for 99.
3, 11.
Okay,
2, 2, 3.
from here, we need to circle what they have in common. What do they have in common?
For
Do they all
No.
3 share a
They all
2?
got 3s.
They all have 3s. Now, if I go to circle it, it's going to look crazy. So what I'm going to do, there's a 3, there's a 3, there's a 3. Do they all share another number?
Yes.
Yes, another 3. So That's okay. Here's another 3, another 3, and another 3. Okay? So my greatest common factor, what do they share here? A 3 and
3.
another 3, which equals.
9.
So my greatest common factor for these 3 numbers
It's 9.
is 9.
Only doing three.
I told y'all.
Do they all 3 have another number in common?
Yeah.
That's why.
Oh, no.
That's okay. No, that's a good question to ask, John. Now, you know, I saved the best for last, right?
I swear to God, if you give us like some crazy.
Now, it is going to be some crazy thing. And if you write big like I do, scrunch it.
Yeah, but man.
No.
Y'all can have this. Don't ask me for no questions. Don't say nothing. No.
Here we go. So on your example lines, 54, A to the third, B to the second, C to the fourth.
Alright, so what am
The
I supposed to
second
drop out?
example line, you're going to write 66, A squared, B cubed, C to the fourth. And then on the third example line for the last example, number 11, you're going to 18A, B to the fourth. Now, sometimes when we see things like this, we're like, oh my goodness, what is all this gibberish, numbers and letters and variables? But that's why we do notes. And when we do our notes, that's why we break things down into steps. So you take it one step at a time, and it shouldn't be as crazy overwhelming. So if we're taking this one step at a time, every time I go to find the greatest common factor, what's my first step? Yeah, I'm going to do the factor tree for each number. So I'm going to do a factor tree for 54. And then I'm going to do a factor tree for 66. And then I'm going to do a factor tree for 18.
Well, 66, I can show you one.
Okay. So what's my factors? So what are my factors? What 2 numbers can I multiply together to get 54?
6, 9. 6, 9.
Oh, you guys are so immature. And what can you multiply together to get 6?
3 and 2.
Okay, and what about 9?
3 and 3.
Okay, stop that.
I don't be
What-
doing nothing.
What about for 66?
11, 6.
9.
6 and 11? We already said 11 was prime.
2 and 3.
And then what about for 18?
No, not.
What else could you use besides 2 and 9 if you wanted to? 2 and 9? What else could you use? How about 3 and Jalen? Yeah. All right, what are my factors for 9?
3 times 3. Thank you for not saying nothing, y'all.
You're welcome.
All right, here we go. So from here, after I do my factor trees, I just list out all my prime numbers in order from least to greatest. So what are my prime numbers for 54?
2 times 3 times 3 times 3.
And then I do for 66. What are my prime numbers for 66?
2 times 3 times 11.
And then for 18.
2 times 3 times 3.
Okay?
Keep going.
We are going to keep going. Okay, from here, this thing gets heavy. From here, what do I do next?
Sir.
We find the greatest
By doing what?
Oh, you so compare word number.
You were starting it off right, Jalen.
Circle your,
Common.
what you say?
Common numbers.
Hey.
Circle my common numbers. Not necessarily my greatest common factor yet. We don't know that. We're going to circle the common numbers to find the greatest common factor. So what are the numbers they all share?
2.
What else?
3.
So 2s,
And another 3.
3s. Do they all share 3 though?
Yeah.
No.
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 Y'all got 11.
Okay, so my greatest common factor is what here?
3.
What's my greatest common factor?
2 times 3.
Which equals?
6.
Okay.
So hold on. Right. Like what you just said.
Now,
What about the numbers at the top of the
now that's where we're going. So once we find our numbers, then I focus on my variables. So I go back up, and I always work left to right. So I start with my first term, and I'm going to see that it has an A with it. So what I do, I'm a visual learner, so I underline the A. Does 66 have an A? Yep. And does 18 have an A? Yes. So we have a to the third, a to the second, and a. Which one's the smallest?
A to the second.
Well, if an a is by itself, that's really like saying a to the first power. So which one's smallest?
B to the two.
A to the first. That's the smallest. One smaller than 2 and 3. So my variable that comes down is a. So then I go back up and I look again. I start at the 54. It has a b, the 66 has a b, and the 18 has a b. So now I'm going to compare the exponents. I have b to the second, b to the third, and b to the fourth. Which one is smallest?
B to the second.
That's the one I use then. So I have b to the second. Then I go back up. Okay, so a C, and does the 18 have a C?
No.
So do they all have that in common?
Yeah.
Do all three numbers have a C in common?
Yeah.
No. So since this doesn't have a C,
Oh,
not all three terms have it in common. So that can't be included in the greatest common factor because it doesn't exist. So my greatest common factor is going to be 6ab squared. Now, are there any questions?
what do you got a 4?